Jabari had heard whispers about the disappearances for years. People had vanished without a trace, and all the stories seemed to point to one unsettling fact. They were last seen near an ancient silk cotton tree deep in the heart of the Trinidadian rainforest. He'd heard the rumors from his colleagues in the city, but as a journalist, he dismissed them as superstitions. But the stories haunted him, and curiosity soon overtook skepticism. Armed with his camera, notebook, and determination, he ventured into the depths of the forest, convinced he would uncover the truth. The forest was dense, with trees towering above him like silent guardians. The deeper he traveled, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air was thick, and the sounds of distant wildlife seemed to fade into an eerie silence. Despite the oppressive quiet, Jabari pressed forward, following an old trail that locals had warned him to avoid. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the trail. As nightfall approached, the feeling of being watched crept over him. He wasn't alone. Finally, after hours of walking, Jabari stumbled upon the silk cotton tree. Its massive trunk stretched high into the canopy, and its twisted roots seemed to coil into the earth like serpents. The tree's presence was overwhelming, a suffocating weight in the air. Jabari approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the ground. Under the roots, he found something buried and partially exposed to the elements. It was a rusted knife, stained with dried blood. Jabari's pulse quickened. The evidence was undeniable. The tree was part of this dark mystery, and the disappearances were no coincidence. Before he could investigate further, he heard a rustling from behind. Spinning around, he found nothing but the heavy, silent forest surrounding him. His breath caught in his throat as he realized that something unseen was watching him. His every move was being observed. The night passed uneasily, with Jabari lying awake in his cabin, his mind raced with the images of the blood-stained knife and the eerie feeling that had come over him in the forest. He couldn't ignore the sensation that something, perhaps someone, was following him. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made his skin crawl. Even the silence of the night seemed to hold its breath. Determined to piece together the mystery, Jabari returned to the forest the next morning. The sun was barely over the horizon, casting golden beams that pierced through the canopy. But even in the daylight, the forest felt otherworldly. The trees seemed to whisper in the wind, their branches swaying in an unnatural rhythm. Jabari reached the silk cotton tree again, this time with a deeper sense of dread. His previous unease was no longer just a feeling, it had become a palpable presence that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. He crouched by the tree's massive roots and began digging carefully around the knife. As he removed the soil, he uncovered more disturbing evidence: pieces of tattered clothing, fragments of old bones, and something that chilled him to the core: a small ancient charm made of bone. It was a token, perhaps, of ritual significance, but Jabari couldn't make sense of it. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered, but the air grew thick and the sunlight dimmed. He could feel the tree pulling him closer. Suddenly, he heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps. But when he turned to look, there was no one there. The forest had gone still again. Only the silence remained more oppressive than ever. His heart raced as he realized that whatever was happening here wasn't just a series of disappearances. It was something far darker, and now it had noticed him. Jabari couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was closing in on him. Returning to his cabin, he tried to process everything he had found, but the overwhelming sense of dread refused to leave. It wasn't just the evidence of disappearances, it was the feeling of being watched, the gnawing sense that he was no longer in control of his own investigation. His mind raced with questions. Who had been here before him? What had driven them to disappear without a trace? And most chillingly, why did the tree seem so alive? That night, Jabari slept fitfully. Dreams of the silk cotton tree tormented him. In his dream, the tree's massive trunk split open, revealing a hollow, dark interior. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged, one with hollow eyes and an expression that was both pleading and enraged. The figure spoke, though no words escaped its lips, only a deep, guttural whisper that Jabari could feel reverberate in his bones. The figure reached out to him, its fingers like skeletal claws, its grip cold and unforgiving. "You're too late," the figure whispered in a voice that was not its own. "The tree remembers." Jabari awoke in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. The room was still, but the oppressive weight of the dream lingered. It felt real, too real. As he lay there trying to calm his racing thoughts, he heard it again, the faint rustling of leaves outside his window. He got up to investigate, but when he opened the door, there was nothing. It was then that he realized the truth. The tree wasn't just a part of the disappearances. It was the heart of something much darker. It was the gateway to something far older and far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. And now, it had marked him. With no answers from his own investigations, Jabari found himself standing at the doorstep of Tessa, the reclusive Obeah woman. He had heard stories of her strange powers and her deep knowledge of the supernatural, and though he had been skeptical at first, the events unfolding around him left no room for disbelief. Tessa lived on the outskirts of the forest, in a small cabin surrounded by a labyrinth of vines and foliage. The air around her home felt different, charged with a quiet, almost palpable magic. Tessa greeted him with a knowing look, as though she had been expecting him. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice low and steady. Jabari was taken aback. He had not mentioned his investigation to anyone, yet she seemed to know exactly why he had come. "I need help," Jabari said, his voice strained with frustration. "I'm being followed, marked by something in the forest, the disappearances, the tree. It's all connected. What is happening?" Tessa's eyes glinted with a mix of pity and caution. "The tree is old, Jabari, older than you could ever imagine. It is a gate, a doorway to a world where the living and the dead are not so easily separated. And you," she paused, "you have crossed the threshold. You are marked by the spirit that dwells there." Jabari's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, marked?" Tessa gave him a grim smile. "The tree has chosen you, just as it has chosen those before you. The spirits are restless, and they will not let you leave without a price. You can try to escape, but not all spirits can be appeased." Her words chilled him to the bone, but he could not back down now. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. Jabari's mind raced as he left Tessa's cabin. The weight of her words pressed heavily on him. He was marked, chosen by the tree, and now there was no turning back. The eerie calmness in her voice only made it worse. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on him. He returned to the silk cotton tree the following day, the forest feeling more oppressive than ever. The sun was hidden behind thick clouds, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. As he approached the tree, he felt a cold breeze brush against his skin. Despite the stagnant air, his heart raced as he remembered the chilling dream, and he hesitated before touching the bark. It was rough and unnaturally warm, like the pulse of a living creature. His fingers brushed against a strange marking on the tree's surface, deep grooves that seemed to form a symbol, one that mirrored the charm he had found beneath the roots earlier. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his chest, as if something had pierced his heart. He staggered back, clutching his chest, gasping for air. The world around him blurred, and for a moment he thought he might collapse. A whisper, barely audible, swept through the trees, and the sensation of being watched intensified. His vision flickered, and he saw the figure from his dream, the hollow-eyed man standing at the edge of the forest, watching him with a twisted smile. "You belong to the tree now," the figure's voice echoed in his mind. "You will never leave." The pain in his chest eased, but the weight of the curse lingered. Jabari knew then that the spirits were no longer just haunting him in his dreams. They were marking him, pulling him into their world. He wasn't just investigating the disappearances. He had become part of the story. Jabari's investigation began to spiral deeper into darkness. He couldn't stop thinking about the charm he had found at the base of the tree. It wasn't just a relic, it was a symbol of something much darker. It was a key, a sign that the spirits of those who had vanished were still tied to the tree. His thoughts turned to Daryl James, a young man who had disappeared years ago, the first in a long line of mysterious vanishings. Jabari tracked down Daryl's family, hoping they might have more information. When he arrived at the James household, the tension in the air was palpable. Daryl's mother, a frail woman with dark circles under her eyes, greeted him with a mixture of hope and grief. She spoke of her son with a sad smile, remembering him as the bright, optimistic young man he once was. But when Jabari mentioned the silk cotton tree, her face fell. "You shouldn't go there," she warned, her voice trembling. "We've tried everything, but we can't find him. They say the forest takes people, that the tree, it calls them. Once you hear the call, you can't escape." Daryl heard it, and now he's gone. Jabari pressed her for more details, but she seemed unwilling or too afraid to speak. Before he could ask more, he felt a sudden chill sweep over him. The air grew heavy, and for a moment it felt as though the forest itself was closing in on him. He glanced around, but there was no one else, only the trees, their branches swaying in the wind. Then he heard it, a soft whisper carried on the breeze. "Help me." It was Daryl's voice. His heart raced as the whisper grew louder. But when he turned to listen more closely, the wind died down, leaving only the heavy silence behind. The forest had spoken to him, Daryl's spirit was calling, and the tree was the source. Jabari was no longer just investigating a story, he was in the middle of it, tangled in the spirit's web. Jabari could not escape the pull of the silk cotton tree. Each day it called to him, its presence haunting his every waking moment. That night, he was again visited in his dreams. The tree loomed large, its branches twisting and writhing like serpents, and in the center of the tree was a dark, gaping hole. Out of the shadows, Daryl James appeared once again, his eyes vacant, his expression a mixture of pain and anger. You don't understand. Daryl's voice echoed through the dream. The tree is a prison, and we are its prisoners. It feeds on the lost, the forgotten, and it will never let us go. Jabari reached out, but Daryl vanished into the shadows. The tree's roots began to creep toward him, pulling him closer to its gaping maw. Jabari tried to run, but his feet were rooted to the spot. The tree's dark energy gripped him, suffocating him, and he could feel the spirits closing in. "Help us," they whispered in unison, their voices a chorus of desperate souls. Jabari awoke with a start, drenched in sweat. The room was still, but the fear in his chest was real. The tree had revealed its true nature, a dark force that consumed those who ventured too close. He couldn't ignore the dream's message. The spirits were trapped, and the tree was the key to their torment. Jabari had to learn on how to free them or risk becoming one of them. Jabari knew he needed answers, but every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into darkness. The more he investigated, the more entangled he became in the web of spirits tied to the silk cotton tree. In desperation, he returned to Tessa. She had warned him about the tree, but now he needed to know how to break free. Tessa greeted him with a somber expression, as though she had been expecting him. "I told you, Jabari," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Not all spirits can be appeased. The tree is not a place of healing, it is a place of hunger. The spirits are trapped, their souls bound to the tree for eternity." "But why?" Jabari asked, his frustration mounting. "What does the tree want?" Tessa's eyes darkened. "The tree feeds on those who stray too far from the living. It consumes their souls, using them to fuel its power. The spirits, you see, like Daryl James, were once like you, alive, full of potential. But they became lost, drawn to the tree's power, and now they are its prisoners. The tree does not give, it takes. And now, you've been marked. You are its next sacrifice." Jabari's heart sank. He had thought he was investigating a series of disappearances. But the tree was not just a physical place, it was a living, breathing entity, one that drew in those who came too close. And now, it had its sights set on him. Tessa leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have one chance to escape. Find the heart of the tree. It is there that you can sever the bond between the living and the dead. But beware, Jabari, the spirits are not kind. They will not let you go without a price." Jabari knew he had to act fast. The deeper he ventured, the more he realized the cost of his investigation. He was not just looking for answers, he was running out of time. Jabari's determination grew stronger with each passing day. Armed with the knowledge from Tessa, he set out to find the heart of the silk cotton tree. The journey into the heart of the forest felt even more treacherous now that he knew the stakes. His every step seemed to echo in the silence of the trees, and the air was thick with an unnatural stillness. The path was no longer just a physical journey. It had become a descent into the unknown. Jabari could feel the weight of the spirits watching him, their presence invisible but undeniable. As he reached the base of the tree, the ground beneath his feet seemed to hum with energy. The ancient roots twisted upward like grotesque veins, and the tree's bark was unnervingly warm, pulsing with an unseen force. Jabari could feel the heartbeat of the tree, its rhythm matching his own, as if they were somehow connected. He had to find the heart of the tree, the core of its power. But how could he locate it in such an overwhelming labyrinth of roots and branches? Suddenly, he heard a voice, faint but clear, whispering from within the tree. "You are too late," it said, and Jabari's heart skipped a beat. The voice was chilling, but not unfamiliar. It was Daryl's voice, now twisted by time and suffering. "The tree has claimed me. It will claim you too." Jabari hesitated, his breath caught in his throat. The spirits were trying to warn him, to deter him from continuing, but he couldn't turn back now. Not after everything he had learned, not after the lives that had been lost. With trembling hands, he placed his palm against the bark, trying to steady his nerves. The tree seemed to respond, its energy surging through him, filling him with a sense of foreboding. And then a crack appeared in the trunk, revealing a hollow space within. He had found it, the heart of the tree. As Jabari stepped into the hollow, he was enveloped in darkness. The air was thick and suffocating, and the smell of decay filled his nostrils. His eyes struggled to adjust, but the deeper he ventured, the clearer it became. The space inside the tree was not just a cavity, it was a chamber, a tomb where the spirits of the lost resided. The walls of the chamber were covered in carvings, strange symbols that Jabari couldn't recognize. Some were simple, others intricate and disturbing. They seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and Jabari couldn't help but reach out to touch them. As his fingers brushed against the first symbol, a surge of visions flooded his mind. He saw Daryl James again, his body twisted and contorted as if he were fighting against an unseen force. He heard the voices of others, trapped within the tree, their cries echoing through time. "We are not free," they whispered in unison. "We are bound to the tree as you will be, forever." Jabari recoiled, his heart racing in his chest. The knowledge he sought had come at a terrible cost. He had uncovered the truth. The silk cotton tree was not just a gateway to the afterlife, it was a prison for the souls of those who had been consumed by its power, and now it wanted him too. He had one chance to escape, but the spirits were growing restless. He could feel their anger building, their energy pressing in from all sides. The price of knowledge was high, and Jabari could already feel the chains of the tree tightening around him. Jabari's heart pounded as he realized the weight of his situation. He had been marked by the tree, and the spirits were closing in on him. The vision of Daryl's twisted form haunted him, as did the cries of the other lost souls. He had uncovered the truth, but now he had to face the consequences of his investigation. The tree was not just an ancient entity, it was a force of darkness that consumed all who came too close, and now it had chosen him. With every step he took, the darkness around him seemed to grow heavier. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the forest beyond the tree felt distant, as though he were no longer part of the world he had known. The spirits whispered, their voices growing louder, more insistent. "Join us," they beckoned, their words a chorus of despair. "You will never leave. You will become one of us." Jabari's pulse quickened. The whispers seemed to come from all directions, and the oppressive energy in the chamber grew unbearable. His mind raced, searching for a way out. He had to find a way to sever the tree's hold on him, to free the spirits trapped within its roots. In the center of the chamber, he noticed a faint light, a soft glow emanating from a small, intricately carved stone. Jabari reached for it, his fingers trembling. As soon as he touched the stone, the ground beneath him trembled and the tree's pulse intensified. The light seemed to respond, its glow growing brighter with each passing second. And then, a voice, not Daryl's, but one filled with ancient authority, echoed through the chamber. You seek to destroy the tree's heart, but you do not understand its power. It is not just a tree, it is the source of all life and death here. You cannot sever its bond without paying the ultimate price. Jabari was overwhelmed by the voice's power. It was as if the entire forest were speaking to him, each whisper and rustle carrying with it the weight of centuries. He had come seeking answers, but now he was entangled in something far beyond his understanding. The tree's heart pulsed with life, and the spirits, long forgotten, had begun to stir. The voice spoke again, this time directly to him. You have crossed into our domain, mortal. Your quest for truth has awakened us, and now you must make a choice. Jabari's mind raced. What choice? What could he possibly offer the spirits to appease them? He had already uncovered the dark truth behind the silk cotton tree, but it was clear now that knowledge alone was not enough. The voice continued, its tone dark and seductive. To free the trapped souls, you must bind yourself to us. Become one with the tree, one with the spirits. You will be free from its power, but you will never return to the world of the living. Or you can leave, but know this. The tree's hunger will never be sated, and those who come after you will meet the same fate. Jabari's heart thundered in his chest. He couldn't leave the spirit to suffer, but the price for their freedom was unimaginable. To become one with the tree, to surrender himself to the spirit, was a fate worse than death. And yet, could he allow others to fall victim to the same fate? The spirits waited for his answer, their whispers growing louder. The decision was his. Jabari's mind was in turmoil. The voices of the spirits, each one calling for liberation, filled his thoughts. The pull of the tree's power was overwhelming, and he could feel the weight of their longing pressing down on him. He had come to the heart of the tree, seeking answers, but now it seemed as though he had been caught in a web of their making. The choice before him was both simple and impossibly complex: to join them, to become part of the tree and free them from their torment, or to live and condemn future souls to the same fate. His body trembled, caught between fear and compassion. The thought of leaving the spirit to suffer was unbearable, but the idea of losing his humanity, of becoming another lost soul bound to the tree, was just as terrifying. Jabari closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, focusing on the fleeting moments of freedom that still remained. He couldn't turn away from the suffering he had uncovered, not now. His instinct, his duty as a journalist, pushed him to act, but he didn't know what that action would be. For a long moment, there was nothing but the heavy silence of the chamber. The whispers faded into a deep, oppressive hum, and Jabari felt as though he was standing at the edge of an abyss, the spirits waiting for his decision. I choose, he whispered aloud, but even as the words left his mouth, He wasn't sure what he had chosen. Was it to free them or to free himself? The ground trembled again, and the tree's heartbeat quickened in response. Before he could make another move, the chamber was engulfed in an intense light, a blinding, searing light that forced him to shield his eyes. And when it subsided, Jabari was no longer alone. When the light faded, Jabari's breath caught in his throat. Standing before him was a figure, a woman cloaked in shadow, her face obscured by a veil of darkness. She was both terrifying and mesmerizing, her presence commanding yet ethereal. The spirit's whisper ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness. The woman was unlike any living being Jabari had encountered, but he could feel her power radiating from within her. You have chosen, but the path you have taken is not an easy one, the woman spoke, her voice like the rustling of leaves in the wind. Who are you? Jabari managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. I am the guardian, she replied, her eyes glowing faintly through the veil. I protect the balance between the living and the dead. The tree you seek to free is ancient, its power unfathomable. It draws those who stray too close, binding them in its web. But there are those who are chosen to guide, to break the chains. Jabari felt a cold shiver crawl down on his spine. He had heard of the guardians, the ancient protectors who held the realms of the living and the dead in equilibrium, but he had never imagined he would meet one. Then how do I free them? Jabari asked, desperation creeping into his voice. How do I stop the tree from consuming more lives? The guardian's eyes gleamed as she stepped closer, her presence suffusing the room. You must sever the link between the tree and the spirits, but to do so, you will have to face the heart of the tree, confront the force that binds it all together. Only by sacrificing what you hold most dear can you sever its hold on the souls trapped within. Jabari felt a pang of dread in his chest. A sacrifice. It wasn't something he was prepared for, but he had no other choice. There were no more questions, no more options. Jabari had always thought of himself as a man of logic and reason. As a journalist, he relied on facts, evidence, and interviews to uncover the truth. But now, faced with a choice between life and death, between the living and the dead, logic no longer mattered. The spirits of the tree were waiting for him to make a final choice, sacrifice himself or sacrifice something else. In the dead of night, Jabari ventured deeper into the forest, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. He wasn't alone. The shadow of the guardian followed him, her ethereal presence ever near. Her gaze never left him, as if she were watching his every move, waiting for him to falter. He reached the tree once again, the very heart of its power, its ancient poles vibrating through the air. The tree was alive, its dark energy suffocating him. Jabari felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead as he approached, but his resolve remained firm. He had to end this. As he placed his hand on the tree's bark once again, a surge of energy coursed through his body. This time, however, it was different. The spirit's cries filled the air, a cacophony of agony and desperation. Jabari could feel their anger, their resentment. He was the one who had awakened them, the one who had delved too deep into the secrets of the tree. Please, he whispered, closing his eyes. I will do what I must. I will break your chains. The tree trembled under his touch, and a deep voice echoed within his mind. To free us, you must give up what you love most. Only then will the chains break. Jabari's heart raced. He had no idea what the tree meant, what it would ask of him. But one thing was clear, he couldn't do this alone. The price was greater than he had ever imagined. Jabari stood at the base of the tree, his body trembling with the weight of the choice before him. He had faced countless dangers, but none as daunting as this moment. The spirit's whispers grew louder, urging him to make his decision. Sacrifice, they chanted. Sacrifice. Jabari closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. He had come to this place seeking justice, to uncover the truth behind the disappearances. But now the truth had become a cause. The silk cotton tree wasn't just a witness to the lost souls, it was the keeper of their fates. A flash of memories hit him like a tidal wave. His family, his friends, the love he had for the world he had known. Could he truly sacrifice it all for the sake of the spirit? Was he willing to give up everything to free those who had been bound by the tree's dark force? The answer was clear. He could not live with the weight of their torment, knowing they would remain trapped forever. The spirit of the tree had offered him a choice: sacrifice his love, his life, his humanity, or walk away and allow the cycle to continue. He took another step forward, his heart heavy, but his resolve unshaken. The tree's pulse thrummed beneath Jabari's fingers, louder now, as if the very heart of the forest were beating in time with his own. He felt the weight of its power surge through him, and with it, a deep, foreboding sense of inevitability. The whispers of the spirits intensified, each voice calling out in desperation, pleading for release. Jabari could feel the suffocating energy pressing against him, the overwhelming force of the tree threatening to consume him whole. But there was no turning back now. He had made his choice. He had to break the bond between the tree and the spirits, no matter the cost. He closed his eyes and whispered a final prayer, letting the darkness around him swallow his words. I will not let your suffering be in vain, he said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. I will sacrifice what I must to free you. The air around him seemed to shift, heavy with an ancient power. As the final words escaped his lips, the ground beneath him trembled violently, and the energy from the tree surged into him. He felt his body pull apart at the seams, his soul stretched between the living and the dead. Jabari's vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he saw the figure of Tessa standing before him, her face bathed in sorrow. You've done well, she whispered, her voice distant. But the tree will not release you so easily. Your sacrifice is not yet complete. The guardian's voice echoed through the chaos. The heart of the tree demands its due. You must give all that you hold dear. Only then will the spirits be freed. Jabari's chest tightened as he realized what he must give up: everything. His ties to the world, his connections, his memories. The tree's power was unyielding. It demanded that he surrender all that made him human. The pressure of the tree's power was suffocating. Jabari could feel his very soul being stretched, pulled apart as the energy of the tree tried to claim him. He was no longer sure where the forest ended and he began. The world around him warped, fading in and out like a half-forgotten dream. The whispers of the trapped souls grew louder, their voices now frantic, desperate. Join us, they beckoned. Become one with the tree, and you will never have to suffer again. But Jabari knew what they were offering was a lie. The tree was not a refuge, it was a prison, and he would not join them. His body ached with the force of the tree's grip, and yet, in the center of the storm, his mind remained focused. The sacrifice he had to make wasn't just physical, it was a surrender of his very essence, of everything he had once believed in. Memories flashed before his eyes, the faces of his family, the friends he had left behind. He could feel their love, their warmth, their presence, but it was slipping away, fading like mist before the dawn. He could feel himself being drawn into the darkness, away from everything he had known. But Jabari would not give in, not when so much was at stake. "I won't let you take me," he whispered through gritted teeth. "I will fight you." With every ounce of willpower he had left, Jabari focused on the stone in the center of the tree's heart. The stone that had once pulsed with light now dimmed, its glow fading as if it, too, was succumbing to the darkness. He could feel the connection between the stone and the spirits, the tether that bound them to the tree. And then knew with a final cry, Jabari reached deep within himself and tore at the thread that connected him to the tree. The moment Jabari severed the bond, the entire forest seemed to shudder. The ground beneath him cracked, and the tree itself groaned with a deep, agonizing sound, as though it were mourning the loss of its prisoners. The air crackled with energy, the heavy weight of the tree's grip loosening for the first time in centuries. The spirit's cries, once filled with anger and torment, began to change, morphing into something lighter, freer. They no longer called out in desperation, instead they whispered their thanks. Jabari's vision blurred again, but this time he saw a light in the distance, a faint glow like the promise of dawn breaking through the darkness. It was the light of the spirits, slowly being released from the tree's hold. They were free. The forest, too, seemed to sigh in relief, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if the weight of ages had been lifted. But as the light enveloped him, Jabari felt the loss. He had given everything, his ties to the living world, his memories, and his connections. He would never see his family again, never hear their voices. The man who had come to the forest seeking justice, seeking truth, was no longer the same. He was now bound to the spirit, to the heart of the tree. But it wasn't a death sentence, it was a rebirth. The guardian appeared once again, her face serene and knowing. "You have made the ultimate sacrifice, Jabari," she said. "The tree is no longer bound by its hunger. The spirits are free." Jabari, now a part of the forest itself, felt a peace settle within him. He had given everything to save them all, and though he had lost his former life, he had gained something far more profound, a place among the spirits where he would watch over the forest, ensuring that the cycle of torment would never begin again. The years passed, and the forest grew once again. The silk cotton tree, now a symbol of renewal, stood proudly among the ancient trees, its dark power no longer a force of destruction. The spirits, now at peace, whispered through the winds that rustled the leaves, their voices gentle and full of gratitude. Jabari, now one with the forest, watched over them. He had found his peace in the whispers of the trees, in the rustling leaves that carried the memories of those who had once been trapped. He was no longer the man who had walked into the forest seeking answers. He was part of something greater now. He was the guardian of the spirits, the one who had sacrificed everything to give them a chance at freedom. And as the sun set over the tranquil forest, Jabari felt the pulse of the tree one last time, a gentle, steady beat that spoke of new beginnings, of life reborn. Though his journey had ended, the forest's heartbeat would continue, and in its rhythm, Jabari would forever remain a part of the tree, a part of the spirits, and a part of the eternal cycle of life and death. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. If you enjoy this journey into Caribbean culture, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment down below.